cassette player and listened to it, and I was very impressed. So there are 5 things that we can do and we should do. The very first point, and we're going to be kind of going through it quickly. We don't have a text per se that we're reading from that we're going to turn to in our Bible, sort of like what Justin said recently when he preached. So I'll be referring to some passages if you want to jot them down. But the first one we're going to look at is the fact that I can stand up and be counted to serve the Lord. Okay? 1 Corinthians 16:13 says, watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong. Watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, and be strong. Sounds like he's encouraging us to be courageous. We have a couple of excellent examples from the Old Testament of true courage. And the first one is Esther, in Esther chapter 4. Of course, the whole book is about her, but especially in chapter 4, when she learned what the plan was to kill her people in order to save them, she went to her husband, the king, to plead for them. And she knew that if she was to go unbidden, there was a good chance that she could be executed because that was against the law. She was very frightened to do it. She and the Jews, they all went without food for 3 days and 3 nights and prayed in an effort to prepare for this thing, that the Lord would be with them. And she said, if I perish, I perish. She was afraid that she might die, but she was willing to risk her life in order to save her people. Esther was courageous. She stood up and to serve the Lord. And of course, there was David. In 1 Samuel 17, when David faced Goliath, he had no fear, did he? He knew the Lord was on his side. He told Saul, I've killed many animals, taken care of my sheep out in the fields, and I will take care of this one too. And when Goliath had been speaking evil to him, David said, I will strike you, then all shall know that the battle belongs to the Lord. So there's an excellent example of courage. Young men, of course, all the men here pretty much have spoken. But when you're first getting started, it's scary to stand in the pulpit. It takes courage to overcome fear of failure, embarrassment, etc., and to stand up before others in service to the Lord. But you can do it. We can do it. 2 Timothy 1 says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And if that's the truth, and it is, then we can do what he would like for us to do. So the first point had to do with courage. We need and we can have courage in our service to the Lord. The second point is I can avoid being overly sensitive. I thought this was an interesting one, and I could just picture them teaching this in the children's classes, that you do not to be overly sensitive so much. And with a little bit of editing for context, this is how I rewrote Ecclesiastes 7, verses 21 and 22. Do not take to heart everything people say, lest what you hear hurt your feelings. For many times also your own heart has known that even you have said things that hurt others' feelings. Is that the truth, or is that the truth? Why is it that we are so sensitive to what others say? And Solomon says, don't take to heart everything people say. But we do. For some reason, oftentimes we have such tender feelings, even as adults, that the least little thing said will strike us down. We may come to a tiff with someone else in our own congregation. Turn the cold shoulder. And you know what that means, don't you? When you won't talk to somebody. That's very noticeable, isn't it? When you both are members of the same congregation. I ran into a member at a wasn't the funeral, but it was a get-together for Tippy's memorial. Ran into somebody who used to be a member here and tried to greet them, and they turned the cold shoulder to me. Wouldn't look at me, wouldn't say a word. The problem with behaving this way, if we are easily offended or worried about what others think about us, it will cause us to shrink back from standing up to serve the Lord. Point number one that we just talked about. If we're that concerned, we'll be too afraid to stand in the pulpit because we're going to be afraid what people think about our performance and our job and what it is that we're saying, and we'll shrink back, and we may not even attempt to do that. Let us instead be selfless, esteeming others better than we, and let ourselves go, putting Christ in our place, Philippians 2:3. Galatians 2:20 says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. Do you get the idea there? We're so much stuck on me, and this is me, and it's not really me anymore. It's Christ in me, isn't it? And I should be looking at myself even differently than I had before as a servant of Jesus Christ. And not be so concerned about what other people think about me. The only thing that matters is what God thinks about me, right? That I'm pleasing him. The third point is I can let my light shine. Matthew 5:16, Jesus in his Sermon on the Mount told his listeners, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Philippians 2:15 says, do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. Can we do it? Sure we can. We can do it. How can we do it? We have to be an example to those who know us. When they see us and the way we behave, we need to have a good influence on them, what they see. A good example is King Josiah. He was crowned king of Judah at Jerusalem when he was only 8 years old. He served for 31 years. And during that time, for some reason, he just must have had good teachers, but it wasn't his father. He had an evil father. He accomplished great spiritual reforms in Judah. He abolished idolatry. He repaired and restored the temple. He restored true worship. When they discovered the Word, they returned to God's law. He did other things, very important things, and accomplished a lot. And he's a good example. We should follow that example, along with that great cloud of witnesses that are mentioned in Hebrews 12:1, by having a good example to those who know us. And we're making really good time. Point number 4, I can make decisions according to godliness. Now, this is something a young person needs to learn very early in life, isn't it? Matthew 5:33, in the same sermon, Jesus said that before our food, drink, and clothing, the very basic necessities of our life, we should, quote, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then all these things will be added to you. We get so concerned with so many other things that are well above and beyond our basic necessities of life. How many of us are really concerned about having enough food to eat? I think we're fairly well fed, and if we're short 1 week or a month, we know where we can get help to get food, don't we? We're going to make many decisions in our lives we need to be very careful as to what's motivating us in that decision-making process. Of course, the more important the decision is, the more time we're going to spend studying on it and thinking about it. But oftentimes, even the little ones, the trivial type decisions, we'll make quickly without thinking because it's just what I want. Personal wants and wishes might enter into the decision making. Worldly desires more than spiritual ones, so we need to be careful. Galatians 5:16, Paul told the Galatian brethren there, I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. That's got to be true. He said it, didn't he? Sometimes we do it anyway, don't we? We slip and we say, I want to spend money on this. I really want it, and maybe I should. Maybe I don't need a $42,000 bass boat, but I sure do want one. My son-in-law and I were walking by some bass boats at Cabela's, and I remembered the cost of a boat from when I was younger. I can't believe they're so expensive now. But then a truck to pull it with is going to cost $90,000, isn't it? Do we need to spend that much money? You know, sure, we need time, don't we, to recreate, but it should be the minority of the time that we spend. And we shouldn't spend so much money on such a small part of our life. So, yes, we can make decisions according to godliness. We can be very careful. And those decisions have to do with more than possessions, obviously. When you're trying to teach young people and even adults such things as modest clothing, for example. When you're standing in the department store and you're looking at the clothes, and how are you going to pick this over that? You know? And you say, well, I just can't buy clothes that are nice, that are pretty, that don't look frumpy, that are absolutely modest. So I don't have a real choice there. Well, you do have a real choice. You always have a choice, don't you? My daughters have found places online where people make attractive, modest clothing. So yes, we need to be very careful. Remember, choices have consequences. The last point number 5, is I can go the second mile. In the same Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 5:41, Jesus said, and whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. This is referring to the Roman impressment law. You've heard this story, what it means, right? But there was actually a Roman law. And any soldier or officer could just seize a citizen and say, here, carry my 60-pound pack, I'm tired. And force you to carry it at least a mile. He was within his rights to do that. Well, I'm not surprised, neither are you, that the Jews hated that. And they hated the Romans for making them do that. I don't want to carry your spear for a mile, or your shield, or whatever else you've got that you want me to carry just because you're too lazy to carry it yourself. That's not what Jesus said. You know, it must have been a problem for him to actually single that out, right? Sure it was. He wants us, instead, when impressed by our brethren or our neighbors, to help them to do more than they ask us to do, demonstrating grace, humility, and love, because that's what those Jews were expected to do. If the soldier said, carry my pack, when he comes up to that mile marker, you say, I'll keep carrying it for you. I'll be happy to do that, to relieve your burden. because your responsibility is great. We should be the same way. We need to learn how to be steadfast in our service to others as well as to God. Galatians 6:9 says, "Let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart." That's to your lesson. It was short, it was sweet, and I think it made some very good points. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. We can be courageous. We can be selfless. We can be influential on those who know us. We can and certainly should be godly in our decision making and in all of our lives. And we should be steadfast in our service to God and to others. So the lesson is yours. If there's any here this morning that might be subject to the gospel invitation, the invitation of Christ, then this is an excellent time to come forward and make your wishes known. If you have any prayer requests, this would be an excellent time to do that. If anything that we've said has caused you to think or rethink your behavior in times past, that perhaps that others might be aware of, and you're embarrassed by your behavior, and you've never confessed it publicly, this would be a good time to do that as well. So we encourage you to come forward, if that's the case, while we stand and sing.